Welcome to Saulcast. Today we're talking about Better Call Saul, Season 6, Episode 4, titled Hit and Run. I'm Gil, here with my brother,
Adam. Usually you say my name.
Yeah, that's right. I get confused because we do it different if we're on one take versus if we're doing Saulcast.
Yeah.
And also, do you remember what I used to say before we got into the episode?
You would be like, we're here with our full recap and now that we've had some time to digest, we're here with our full recap and analysis.
Right, but then I would end by saying, I'm Gil, I'm Adam, and then I would say, let's get into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
we should bring that back.
we did our instant take earlier in the week. This is our full recap and review. Let's get into it. We'll start by talking about Gus.
It's a little rusty, but you'll get it back.
Yeah, exactly. We're only halfway through the season. So we open up with a husband and wife going for a very pleasant bike ride. They complain about this new ugly red house, this red paint. We see a camera's watching them, and then when they get home, we see where the footage of that camera is being fed. A bunch of surveillance cameras in this house, and we see they're watching Gus's house, which you might not know. The episode doesn't tell you that, but if you remember Gus's house from Breaking Bad, you can tell that's what they're watching. So first off, there's not a lot of context at the start of this. The way it initially hit me is that this is just a fun opening, a much lighter tone after a really intense episode last week.
Well, and so I've been getting kind of frustrated with not with the show itself, but with the writers of the show, because in interviews lately, they've been accidentally leaking a lot of information and revealing stuff. Overall, I've done a pretty good job of avoiding spoilers, but with the episode being titled Hit and Run, knowing that Saul and Kim are involved in some plan that we at this point already know is going to involve Howard's car.
Right.
And now opening with these two bikers, I put all the pieces together and I was like, they're going to get hit by a car. I was pleasantly surprised that didn't happen.
Right. And toward the end of the episode, we find out what exactly is happening here. So it's a little complicated. But here, I'll go through it. So we see Gus get home, takes off his shirt. He's wearing Kevlar, takes off his gun holster for a second.
Can we talk about the clip-on tie for a second?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Go for it.
Well, I said this on the instant take, and I think it's just, look, Gus, when he's in drug lord mode, doesn't wear a clip-on tie. The clip-on tie is like his chicken man persona.
Now, I saw some people think maybe he wears a clip-on tie so nobody can strangle him.
It's not out of the question, but he wears a regular tie in other scenes in the show. So.
Well, and if you're going to strangle someone, I feel like you're not depending on them wearing a tie.
Yeah.
You come in with one of those, I forget the name. There actually is a name for those little metal wires.
Chicken wire?
No, there's like a name for when it's specifically designed as a weapon to choke someone. You probably bring one of those.
Yeah. I always keep one on me just in case.
Of course.
When I worked I was like working in a hospital at one point, and they made sure we had like lanyards with our badges on them, and they made sure that they would break away if pulled on so that you couldn't get choked like by an angry patient or something.
Or if you're walking by like a doorknob and it gets caught.
No, that's what would happen to me.
So Gus gets home, right? He takes off the gun holster for a second to let his ankle breathe. Then he goes downstairs through a secret underground tunnel, which leads to his neighbor's house. And as he walks through that tunnel, we see a Gus body double walk by him, which I missed the first time.
Whoa, I didn't see that.
Yeah, apparently I just have a blind spot. I'll speak for myself. I cannot see body doubles, apparently, because I missed the Lalo body double. I saw him. I just didn't realize right away.
Didn't register as a body double, even when he told him to shave.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thought crossed my mind. And then here I missed the Gus body double.
I didn't see it.
And then later, like the car that the guy driving the car that kicks Wendy out, that wasn't Howard. That was Jimmy. That's a joke. I know that was Jimmy. But so a Gus body double walks by him, and then Gus walks into his neighbor's house, joins Mike in the surveillance room we saw earlier.
Where does he find all these people?
I know. So yeah, let's go through exactly what's happening.
We have
here.
trouble finding like a good video editor or something for this channel. Like,
well,
meanwhile, he's finding people who can, first of all, keep these massive secrets and also actually do a good job. Maybe not always, though, because we do learn that someone isn't Poyos material.
That's right. Yeah. But we should say, for the people that do edit for this channel,
oh, they're amazing.
They're great. Yeah. The point is, it was hard to find you.
Yeah.
And now we're so glad that we did. Yeah. So what's happening here? Basically, Gus is paranoid that Lalo or someone may come after him. So he's dealing with that in two ways. One, he's got eyes everywhere. Later in the episode, or earlier than this point in the episode, we see that Jimmy and Kim, or specifically Kim, is being followed in case Lalo were to reach out. We also find out that there's a cook working at Los Pollos Hermanos who is actually basically a bodyguard hired by Mike. So Gus has eyes everywhere. The other way he's dealing with Lalo or someone else going after him is he has two houses. Now, he's a public figure, Gus, so he can't exactly go into hiding and just disappear off the face of the earth for a while. So how does he hide in plain sight? Two houses. So in the phone book, you'd find him in house number 1. And if anyone were spying on him, they'd see him walk in to house number 1. And from a distance, they'd see that body double walking around. So you'd think Gus is in there. But in reality, Gus goes through that tunnel into house number 2 and hangs out there. While Gus is in house number 2 or conducting business there, there's a very nicely furnished basement where the couple living in house number 2 can hang out. Why is that couple even there to begin with? Well, I assume that Gus only goes to house number 2 when they're at like DEFCON 1. When there are problems, that's when he needs to body double and he goes into his backup house. When there are no problems, this couple hangs out in that backup house. Because if somebody were spying and they saw a fully furnished house that no one is ever in, that would look suspicious. So a couple lives there. And why would they do that, like this couple? Why are they cool with, at any point, they might get a call that says, hey, you got to go hang out in the basement for a while? I assume Gus takes care of them, similar to the way that Lalo took care of the couple that he had as his backup plan. Money, exactly. The same way you find a good
Same reason anyone does anything.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know, did I miss anything there? I think
that makes sense to me. You basically have this satellite house that's full of security personnel and I mean, this is like a bunker, basically.
Right.
And to make it all fit in, you can't just have this be empty all the time. It would be suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. And it was pretty cool the way they unveil that to us in the episode. It starts with that out of context cold open. If you pay attention to details and you have a great memory, you recognize that it's Gus's house and you wonder who's watching Gus. And then you find out Gus is watching Gus.
Yeah.
So it's a fun way of unveiling it without just saying it. It makes us ask some questions first. When Gus joins Mike in the surveillance room, Mike seems to think that Lalo is dead. He says, with all due respect, the rest of the world thinks Lalo is dead. We haven't heard a peep in 2 weeks. And Gus says, Lalo Salamanca lives. Not really.
No, thankfully, he didn't repeat the line word for word.
Yeah, he says Lalo Salamanca is alive. And Mike asks, then where is he? Cut to Lalo Salamanca.
No, but everyone expected it.
Yeah, that's like what any other show would have cut to Lalo right there. But instead, it cuts to Kim. And we'll come
Which
back
is
to
still
that.
not... There's probably some intentionality to that because I think the show is continuing to build some form of connection between Lalo and Kim in the sense that, first of all, when Mike is thinking who's the one that needs to be watched, who needs kind of both the protection and the eyes on them, and who is he telling the truth about them being watched, he's talking to Kim.
Right.
Kim's the one who stood up to Lalo. There's actually, like, Kim is probably more in Lalo's sights right now than Jimmy is.
And that's when Mike tells Kim he reached out to her because she's made of sterner stuff. Mike must be thinking that Lalo is thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So if Lalo were to reach out, he'd go to her.
Right. I bet in Lalo's mind, Saul is more of a useful idiot than a mastermind.
Yes.
Which I think is not totally right, but given their personal experiences with each other, I understand why you'd think that.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the moment this season when Jimmy makes a real decision for himself, because so far he's going along with Kim's plan. I mean, he's helping in the planning process, but you've got to think at some point he's going to make a choice. Yeah. And I'm really curious to see that. Any other just thoughts on the Gus storyline before we go over to Jimmy and Kim, which makes up the bulk of the episode?
I think the show does a pretty good job doing this like evil mastermind shtick for him without it seeming too unrealistic or over the top. Like we already know, like Gus is building this gigantic secret underground super lab, so like he's no stranger to like underground tunneling and concealing stuff like that. He has the resources for this kind of thing. Early in Breaking Bad, a lot of the things he did established between him and the way that the twins are. You do have some characters that are these, to an extent, these cliche supervillains, but not in a way that took me out of it. Yeah. There was like a chance, like when he went and moved the bookshelf, for a split second, I like maybe rolled my eyes a little bit because I was like, here we go. But I actually, the more I saw it, the more I was fine with it.
Yeah, and it's just, this show is great at novelty, just showing you things you haven't seen before. So when Gus has this bookshelf that moves to the side, I'm thinking, is there going to be like a Gus Fring bat cave here, an armory or something?
Or maybe it's just where he chills.
Yeah, but I never would have thought it's an underground tunnel to his neighbor's house, which includes a really just awesome basement area where you can hang out and play Scrabble. And then I'll just add, I mean, it was all just cool. Like the opening of the couple walking around was fun and funny in that, why are they showing us this kind of way? Yeah. The oneer that follows Gus through the tunnel, with no cuts, that was great. But I mean, I feel like if you watch it, you know that. You don't need us to just sit here and say, this was awesome, that was awesome. Yeah. So honestly, I don't have too much to say about the Gus storyline besides it was really cool to see all this. Interesting, and it sets up the question of where is Lalo? I mean, that question was already there, but it's a big reminder that something's coming.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Jimmy and Kim. We see Howard arrive for therapy, where we learn that things are going well at work, but pretty poorly at home. He describes him and his wife Cheryl as deadlocked. She won't discuss anything important with him. And then he tells the therapist, I did have a dream. Cut to an out-of-focus shot of behind Jimmy's head when he's in a Howard disguise.
Yeah, that was funny.
Now, did you have the same reaction as me?
Right, they're showing us his dream, which is something that's so out of the ordinary for this show.
Yeah, because I feel like when you do a dream sequence, you'll start out of focus. You'll have some kind of whimsical music, and then it slowly comes into focus. And that's exactly how that scene started.
And it's like, of all the things, like, we really we've seen none of Howard's personal life until this point. This is really like the most intimate setting we've seen him in. Mm-hmm. And to think, well, we're about to see his innermost like dreams and thoughts was pretty funny, and I was like really curious.
Yeah.
And then I liked the way they kind of surprised us.
Yeah, I was getting ready for a entire episode that takes place in Howard's mind.
Sequence. Yeah, because we totally have the time for that with like 9 episodes left.
Yeah. So like you said, this is a window into Howard's personal life. We've heard about him going to therapy. We saw little flashes of the issues he was having with his insomnia. This is the first time we've seen him here talking to his therapist, and we hear the mention of the wife. And it's a funny thing because I'm sure you can see the wedding ring in any number of episodes that Howard is in, but it just never occurred to me, that's right, he's married, he's got a life that we don't really hear about.
Yeah, the time that really occurred to me was when Jimmy was throwing bowling balls at the car. Mm-hmm. Just because, like, it's not just Howard who's going to see the consequences of that because he's living in this home with a family.
Yeah. And it's not just, I mean, not to harp on that too much, but it's not just something that woke you up in the middle of the night, but that also probably feels like an invasion of privacy, where now you're worried anybody can just show up at her house in the middle of the night. And I think one of the important things that happens with this scene, by showing his personal life, as we approach D-Day, whatever that means for Howard, and as we get later into this season, as Jimmy and Kim are forced to reckon with the morality of their actions, I think one of the things that the show is trying to show us is that Jimmy and Kim walk around like everybody around them are pawns in whatever scheme or whatever game
they're all NPCs.
Yeah, they're all NPCs, and here we see that's not the case. We see that Howard has a life that we're not privy to. And he's not the only one. We also see Cliff Main. We hear mention of his son that's having drug problems. Mm-hmm. So I think we're seeing, even Gus, the little ankle, that little moment of vulnerability where it's uncomfortable to have this thing on his ankle all day. We see these little vulnerabilities that I think remind us that all these background players are real people. And I think that's set up for that moment of reckoning I assume we're going to get at some point.
Next, we're going to see one of the twins coming out of the bathroom or something.
Yeah. These are real people, too.
Yeah.
So Jimmy takes Howard's car while he's in therapy, leaves a cone so the spot will be available when he gets back, and he heads to the Crossroads Motel, which in Breaking Bad is referred to as the Palace. You might remember that Hank takes Walt Jr. there so he can meet Wendy and see the consequences of drug use.
Yeah.
Jesse also purchases Wendy's services at one point. He also uses her as an alibi and tries to have her poison the drug dealers that had Combo killed. So Jimmy is here at the Palace. He's picking up Wendy, and he's going to use her in their next scheme. So meanwhile, Kim meets with Cliff Main at a cafe. Under the table, she uses her phone to tell Jimmy when they're ready. And when she gives the go-ahead, Jimmy, disguised as Howard in Howard's car, drives in front of the cafe, kicks Wendy out of the car, and then speeds off.
Now that's a big step in this plan, because that's one of the more illegal things we've seen them do.
Right.
They stole a car.
Yes.
That's different than the putting the little baggie of what we are led to believe is baby powder in the locker. That really feels minor compared to something like this, at least in the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
Not that I know that much about it, but
yeah, I would assume this is a worse offense than what you could write off as almost a practical joke.
Right, and there's so many ways it could go wrong. Like, what if something happens to the car, or what if you get in an accident and you're stuck? You just have to abandon it, and now he knows for sure his car was stolen.
Right.
They're going to start checking security footage, which would kind of be very confusing because they'll see that it's someone who looks like Howard, but he has an airtight alibi.
What if somebody moves the cone?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot that can go wrong. But everything seems to go according to plan. After seeing a baggie of what he thinks is cocaine, after hearing the Kettleman's complaints, after seeing a couple of prostitutes show up at lunch.
Howie.
Yeah. Now, Cliff believes that with his own eyes, he's seen Howard. The other night, I said rudely kick a prostitute out of his car. And then when I was talking to Pete, he was like, is there a non-rude way to do that? So before Jimmy shows up, Kim actually pitches Cliff her idea for a practice dedicated to high-quality pro bono work. And it speaks to him because of his son's drug problems. Yeah. A son named Jesse Pinkman. Not really. It was a son named Gregory who goes by the nickname Combo.
No way.
No, that's not true. Yeah, so Cliff has a son named Gregory who has drug problems, who has issues with the law. So this idea, this practice that Kim wants to open, it speaks to him.
What if it's Badger?
Could be Badger, right? We don't know. Now, interesting to note, rewatching the episode, Kim doesn't send Jimmy the text that says, go. She doesn't send that text until Cliff says, Kim, I think you've got something here. So she wanted to make sure she had a chance to properly sell the idea before Jimmy showed up. So this has been an ongoing theme with Kim, where she's trying to do some good and some bad at the same time. So in general, she has this have your cake and eat it too mentality. And is that going to work? We start to see the consequences of it in this episode. Jimmy at the courthouse, he's a pariah. Kim's being followed. She's getting more and more involved with Lalo in this whole world. So right now, she's getting away with doing a little good and a little bad simultaneously. But I think one of the themes of the show is there's no getting away with doing the wrong thing.
And I have to say, this is one of the first times watching the two of them get up to these kinds of illicit antics where I started to actually viscerally feel kind of uncomfortable and not good about it.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling similar moments in Breaking Bad. You know, it's almost a meme at this point where it's like, and in that moment, Walter White became Heisenberg.
Right.
You know, it used to be when you would see them scheming and doing all these things, it was just kind of exciting and like you're really curious to see how they're going to pull it off. And it's like fun to watch the process unfold. This had all of those elements, but it also had this element of like, Howard really doesn't deserve this. First of all, they let us more into his personal life, and it made me feel some more empathy for him. But once you actually see, like, imagine if someone you were close friends with and worked closely with believed they saw you do what Saul did with Wendy. I mean, that would make my stomach sink. I would be nervous. I would feel horrible. Mm-hmm. And they're doing this to Howard, and I mean, he really doesn't deserve it.
No. I mean, they're also doing it to Cliff. Like, if
True,
they have
yeah.
to settle the lawsuit because his partner in law for this particular case is falling apart, like, that's not a comfortable position to be in.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I was watching the episode, and at a certain point, I think I even said it out loud. I was like, what a couple of jerks,
Yeah.
Jimmy and Kim.
Yeah.
And part of it is when they're just doing one kind of grift to a character that we know nothing about except for a couple of a-hole things they do, it's easy to get caught up in the moment. But with them being so, like, putting so much talent and skill and scheming into what they're doing, it's hard not to just shake your head at it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why when Huel asked Jimmy that question, like,
Yeah,
why
well-
are you doing this? I really related to that. So Jimmy returns to the therapist's office to find that someone moved that cone and took Howard's spot.
This is This is like a classic Better Call Saul scene right here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love the moments of Jimmy
high
back
pressure.
to a corner.
It's fun. Yeah, exactly. Like you have the scene in the season premiere where he's at the golf club and has to kind of improvise, where he accuses everyone of anti-Semitism. He starts stripping naked in the locker room to make sure no one looks at him. Yeah, this is classic, like, impromptu, high pressure hijinks.
It does exactly. I mean, the tone of Better Call Saul at its best is you're laughing, but you're also really uncomfortable and tense at the same time. Yeah. And this pulled that off perfectly. So Jimmy gets out of this by taking the patient's only sign and moving it in the dirt. So when Howard gets outside, he won't notice that his car is moved. And it works. And I think it's also similar to the theme I just talked about with Kim thinking she can do good and bad but suffer no consequences for it. They think that they can read anybody. They think that everyone around them are pawns and they can manipulate them. And you've got to think that Jimmy told Kim, we put an orange cone there. Nobody ever violates an orange cone. Trust me.
Yeah.
And he finds out they're wrong. People are not always predictable. Kim drops Wendy back off at the palace. And then Wendy points out a car which she believes is an undercover police car, that they're being followed. As Kim leaves, the car seems to follow her. This is the car that was following Jimmy and Kim back in episode 2. At home, Jimmy tells Kim about the moving sign, laughing it up. And I wanted to point out that moment because the last few episodes, when we're at Jimmy and Kim's home, we see them acting like a couple more than we've ever seen it before, helping each other get dressed. Just they're not arguing with each other. It's all smiles. And I think it's no mistake that that's happening when they're deep into a scheme together. Kim tells Jimmy that Cliff definitely bought it. She says it was beautiful. She also says that when she was pitching Cliff on the practice, she was just trying to buy time, but then she kind of got caught up in it, and Cliff actually went for it. She says, I don't think he'll write a check himself, but he knows people. So a couple thoughts on this scene. One, when Kim says it was beautiful, it kind of reminded me of last season when they came up with their whole scheme to humiliate Kevin Wachtel and blackmail him.
Something beautiful, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember if that was the episode with that title. But what I was going to say is that when Kim wanted to call it off, Jimmy couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
He essentially said it was too good a move. It was like hitting a home run. He had to go through with it. Like, he just appreciates the beauty of the grift. And Kim uses similar language here, saying it was beautiful. Like, she just appreciates the skill of what they did. And when Kim says that she kind of got caught up on it and ended up really pitching Cliff on this idea, I don't think she actually got caught up in it. I think she went to that meeting with the intention.
She wanted to.
Yeah. And I think she's just a little bashful to admit that to Jimmy. Like, she knows that Jimmy doesn't have the same moral ambition as she does.
Yeah.
You know, he's not that excited about we need to help the people who need it. So she's kind of like, I wasn't going to pitch him on the idea, but I had to, and I got kind of caught up. And then she tells Jimmy about being followed. So Jimmy reassures her by saying, you know what they say, the wicked flee when no man pursueth. What does that mean, Adam?
It means if you know you're up to no good, you're going to be looking over your shoulder because you have this guilty conscience, or you're at least afraid of getting caught.
Yeah, if you're stuffing down that guilty conscience and telling yourself you're doing the right thing on the surface, those bad feelings are still going to come through as paranoia that someone's going to catch you. And it is a proverb, by the way, and there's a second part to that proverb I'll mention in a moment. But Kim says, "You think we're wicked?" And Jimmy tries to write off that notion very quickly. He's like, no, it's a turn of phrase. You're wicked hot, if anything. So a few thoughts on this. One, Jimmy's delivery of the line I thought was great. Perfect for the trailer, which they had it in the trailer before the season came out. It also reminded me a little bit of Gus because he's kind of hiding out, running. We don't know if Lalo's actually going after him. And just like Kim, he's afraid that someone's coming after him. And then when Kim responds to Jimmy saying, you think we're wicked, what do you think she's thinking there?
This kind of reminds me of a theme that's come up a lot on this show, which is people being comfortable and accepting who they are, right? Gus says he knows what he is. Mike becomes more comfortable being a soldier for Gus by accepting the hand he's dealt and recognizing what he is. Jimmy knows that they're wicked. He knows that what they're doing is kind of wrong. And I don't think it's getting to him on a moral level, but in terms of the fear of getting caught or the fear of getting killed, that's real for him. Kim, I think, is kind of deluding herself.
Yeah, she's not doubting whether they're wicked or not, right? But initially I read it that way, like, oh, is Kim wondering if they're wicked? But I don't think that's the case at all. I think that she's noticing Jimmy's hesitation.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have a great poker face.
He's going soft.
Oh, yeah. And he's had this look on his face for the last 3 episodes of just concern. And, of course, when Kim originally pitched the idea of going after Howard, Jimmy was completely thrown by it. The next episode in season 6, he didn't even know that they were actually going to go through with it. So we noticed as an audience. I'm sure Kim noticed as well.
Yeah.
So when Jimmy says the thing about wicked, she's like, do you think we're wicked? Like, is that what's bothering you? So I think that's what's going on there. And yeah, Kim, like you said, she's like Gus. She accepts who she is, I think, at this point. So she moves forward very confidently. And that's actually the second part of the biblical proverb. The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion. And I think Kim sees herself as righteous.
So I sort of took that Gus parallel differently. I was suggesting that Jimmy knows what they are and doesn't necessarily feel good about it, or he feels fearful. Whereas Kim is kind of suppressing this or not even really considering it. But given the context of the second part of that proverb, I actually think you're right. I think Kim maybe has accepted what they are, but doesn't consider it to be wicked.
Right. In her mind, they're taking from someone who doesn't deserve it and giving to people who really need it, and they're doing good in the world. Yeah. I think Jimmy, it's unclear what's in his mind. I think he's probably conflicted. I mean, we saw last season when he's talking to Mike, and he's so concerned about Fred Whalen and all this. So, I do think he's at least more conflicted than Kim is at this point. So Jimmy reassures her, you got away with something, and that's why you feel like you're being watched. At the courthouse, everyone looks down on Jimmy for having helped Lalo Salamanca escape. Even Bill Oakley, the security guard, makes him take off his shoes. The woman who we saw back in episode 1 of the series, who always facilitates Jimmy's meeting requests in exchange for Beanie Babies, she won't help him out and he eats lunch by himself. Yeah. By the way, the Beanie Baby that she doesn't accept from him, I think it's a little white owl.
It's a little graduate, right?
Yeah, I think it's an owl, with the graduation cap. We see that Beanie Baby in the opening to the season in Saul Goodman's mansion. It gets thrown in the no value box. I
wonder how that got back to him.
Well, she didn't accept it.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
okay.
So he just left with it. It feels like every episode we're going to get one more thing.
Another little object.
Yeah. And so Bill says Bill's the one who finally tells Jimmy why everyone's treating him so horribly or just ignoring him. He said, you let a murdering psychopath go. Jimmy says, prove it. And Bill says, there's proving and there's knowing.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is more of that. You think you can get away with stuff. You think you can cover your physical tracks. You can, but people aren't as dumb as you think.
Right. Just because you can get away with stuff on paper doesn't mean people will not have their opinions and reactions to you.
Yeah. And so they see Saul for who he really is, or at least, who knows who he is, but they see what he's done. They know the bad things he's done. So Kim confronts the people that are following her. They admit to nothing and they leave. And we get a little crossover here. NoHo Hank from Barry.
Oh, that actually was him?
It's not actually
him,
okay, no.
Because it did look like him.
I thought it looked just like him.
Yeah, I mean, like a gangster with alopecia. Like,
yeah, and I know I'm not the only person.
I hope Will Smith didn't hear that.
So I saw a few people in the chat the other day brought that up too. So this thought would be funny to mention. At lunch, Jimmy takes calls for many appointments. Saul Goodman is getting real popular. Jimmy heads to the nail salon where many potential clients wait for him, and the nail salon owner is not happy about that, just because of all these rough and tumble folks that are hanging around. Spooge is one of the clients.
Yes.
He says, "You're the guy, right? Salamanca's guy?" So a couple things happening here. On a plot standpoint, we're seeing Saul's growing reputation as the guy who represents people like Spooge. Mm-hmm. And then on a thematic level, and we talked about this a lot in the instant take, but time and time again, we see the negative reinforcement. When Jimmy tries to do something right, it doesn't go well. When he tries to do something wrong, it does. So, of course, it's going to encourage more of that behavior. So Jimmy goes to the courthouse. Everyone hates him. He goes to the nail salon, Spooge, all these other rough and tumble types. Mm-hmm. They want to be represented by him. They love Saul Goodman. So I think we're seeing more of that.
Not only that, but there's this important line he's about to cross, which is he's getting kicked out of the nail salon because of that day. It's not bad news for him. In fact, he had a great, like the same way Kim said, this was like the best day of my life, my professional life. She then added, after she did all this pro bono work. For Jimmy, this was a great day.
Yeah.
Even though he's getting evicted or kicked out of the back of the nail salon and all that. But it was like that last push to get him to, like, we know now that he's about to buy or at least rent the place that ends up becoming the office of Saul Goodman.
Yeah, so that's another important point plot-wise, is that this is also what gets him kicked out. Yeah, and then gets him to his real office. There are a couple of reminders in this episode where they kind of show us, here's a little thing from the past that's now gone. There's the nail salon. Mm-hmm. This may be the last time we see it.
Well, we know he ends up buying it. Using it, I think he ends up using it as a money laundering.
He keeps offering it to Jesse. He wants Jesse to buy the nail salon.
Or then he wants Walter to buy a laser tag place.
Yeah, he loved the laser tag idea. But the other one I was going to point out is Mike, when Kim says, "Oh, you were the parking attendant, right?"
Yeah.
So it's another little thing from a past life that is so far away from where they are now. And speaking of which, at the El Camino diner, Mike surprises Kim. He reveals that the guys following her were his guys. Mm-hmm. Lalo is alive, so they're watching anyone he may contact, which includes Kim and her husband. By the way, every time they say like Kim and your husband or Jimmy your wife, it always like
I just had that feeling of like, oh right, I forgot that they're married.
Yeah, it's easy to forget.
I wonder if that might come up again. There might be something with that.
Yeah, just with the marriage. And
just the fact that they're married, like it doesn't come up, but it's a real thing, and they did it for real legal reasons.
Yeah. You wonder if at some point, there was discomfort when they got married from Jimmy because he's worried like this is probably not the wedding you had in mind when you were younger. So I do wonder if at some point they're going to ask themselves like, how much of this is romance? How much of this is we're having fun scheming together? Like, what are we, Jimmy? Yeah. Or what are we, Kim? So
I don't want to put a label on it.
No. So Mike leaves, and before he does, Kim recognizes him as the parking attendant. She goes, "Yeah, you were the parking attendant, right?" And he goes, "I was." Yeah. And then he leaves. We talked a little bit about, I guess plot-wise, we learn who's following them, and now Kim knows that Lalo is alive. Mm-hmm. And then from a character standpoint, why did Mike go to Kim and not Jimmy? He says it's because I think you're made of sterner stuff. And we talked about this on the instant take. It's not hard to see why Mike would have that impression. He saw Kim stand up to Lalo, watching them through his sniper. And then he saw the way Jimmy handled the idea that Lalo may still be out there, showed up at Mike's house, banging on the door, freaking out, wanting answers. Mm-hmm. So from what he's seen...
Which is definitely what I would do.
100%.
Yeah.
From what he's seen, Jimmy is incapable of compartmentalizing. Putting aside Lalo may be out there, I need to go on with my daily life. Jimmy can't do that. Kim can. What do you think was going through Kim's mind when she saw Mike and remembered he was the parking attendant? He says, "I was." Do you think that? I mean, I saw a few people wonder if maybe she looks at Mike and says, "Okay, he was a normal guy, and sometime in the last few years he broke bad. I'm on a similar path." Do you think this causes any kind of self-reflection for her?
Maybe not self-reflection so much as self-affirmation, realizing, wow, there's this whole other world. People have lives that I just didn't even know about. And so I have that too.
Right.
And maybe it's just kind of normal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a little bit that, and I think it's what we talked about before, where it's sort of just a reminder of how far she's come. Again, Mike, the parking attendant, feels like a lifetime ago, similar to how Kim, being at the courthouse, seeing that parking attendant, also feels like a lifetime ago.
She's also just the fact that, as great as Mike is, if he's having a conversation with you about anything remotely criminal or like related to the underworld, you are on bad choice road.
Yes.
Right. And so she is getting very close to the point of no return when it comes to whether or not she's in the game.
Yeah.
You could argue it's already too late. First of all, because of her association with Saul, her willing association, and because of her face-to-face meeting with Lalo twice.
Yes. They've done, for most of the series, Jimmy's cartel life has been so separated from Kim, and it's always very uncomfortable to see her walk into that life. Like you said, when she confronts Lalo, and now Mike's a good guy for us, but seeing the two of them on screen together talking, it's very uncomfortable. Because, it does say that Kim is in the game, and for some of this, she's been kind of a puppet master behind Jimmy, advising him on how to handle, do I rat on Lalo or not situation. But here, she's the one having the conversation.
Right.
So it's uncomfortable.
And at this point, it's probably safe to assume that Gus knows who Kim is. Which just the fact that Saul and Kim are on his mind, the fact that he's going to have brushes with the law, or he might end up needing some legal assistance.
Yeah.
Like, Kim is probably a good person to go to.
Maybe Madrigal needs an in-house attorney.
Yeah, they have their pro bono or charitable work, and then I could see her joining something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And actually, you just reminded me, the idea of Gus just knowing everything and having eyes everywhere. There's an episode in Breaking Bad where at night Walter goes to Gus's house with the intent of shooting him. He gets out of his car, he starts walking toward the house, and then gets a call. I believe it's Mike on the phone, and he just says, "Go home, Walter." and now we could have assumed from that scene there's some kind of surveillance.
Yeah.
Now we've actually seen the surveillance.
Yeah.
So the episode ends with Jimmy inviting Kim to see the strip mall where he's decided to open his Saul Goodman's new office. Jimmy is psyched because he had a great day. People have been throwing cash retainers at him just to say Saul Goodman is their lawyer. And Kim says, because of who you represented. Jimmy says, this place is temporary, until I find something better, which kind of made me sad because the better place he finds is a Cinnabon.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
And then Kim basically says, it's small, dirty, it smells funny, but the courthouse is 5 blocks away. You can't get to the detention center without driving past it. Good parking, bail bond row is not far, and Taco
right next
Cabeza.
to Taco Cabeza.
That's right. And then she just she ends it by saying, "Just promise me you won't move the toilet," because inside all there currently is a toilet in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
So they head out for tacos, but Kim looks over her shoulder before they leave and doesn't tell Jimmy about Lalo.
Yes.
So that was the most interesting part of the scene for me.
Well, every episode they're further reinforcing the idea that Kim is wearing the pants in this relationship, both, especially on a kind of a professional level, on the level of their scheming and their planning. This entire time, Jimmy has been nervous, lacking confidence. He can pull it together when they're in the middle of a grift or whenever he's in the heat of the moment, but he's generally shaky.
Right.
Kim is committed. She doesn't even think that they're doing anything wicked, or she doesn't think of it that way. And here she is kind of looking out aware that they're being watched, keeping Saul in the dark.
Yep. Yeah.
Huge shift.
Definitely. I mean, like you said, it's nearly every episode we see something that gives that impression. Why do you think she chose not to tell Jimmy about Lalo?
I mean, if I'm thinking practically, she's probably, like you mentioned earlier, she can probably tell that he's a little bit off his game. It would just make it worse if he knew. I mean, from her perspective, it might just make it worse if now here's another thing he needs to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe keep him in the dark, let him think that he's fine, that he's safe, because as long as one of them knows, maybe that's good enough.
And we saw this play out already in season 5 because Jimmy was freaking out when they thought when they knew Lalo was still alive, and he didn't want Kim to go to work. And she says, "What are we going to do? Just stay in, hide for the rest of our lives?" So she already knows that Jimmy can't really handle this. And if anything, he's still shaken from all his recent experiences. So I think that's exactly it. She agrees with Mike. At least at the moment, she is made of sterner stuff. And by the way, so this is the strip mall where Saul opens up his office. He's next to a Mei Hong Vietnamese restaurant. That's the name of the restaurant. And in Breaking Bad, that restaurant is still there.
Oh, good for them.
And of course, everyone has the question, is Kim still around during Breaking Bad? Will she ever be in that office with Jimmy? And I found a little clue that's been around since season 3. So people have pointed this out, but I'm surprised it hasn't been brought up more frequently. But in Saul Goodman's office during the time of Breaking Bad, we see a very peculiarly shaped desk. And, where'd that desk come from? Kim's office in season 3, she has that desk. So Kim's desk, I'll put up the picture, that's Kim's desk. That very same desk is in Saul Goodman's office in the time of Breaking Bad.
Interesting.
So either Kim has a desk in Saul Goodman's office, she uses it sometimes, or maybe she just donated an office or donated a desk to Jimmy.
Yeah.
And he just still has it. So that's pretty interesting.
And if people find that these sorts of things interesting, they should check out your video on the importance of objects.
That's right.
Because this show does a lot with physical objects. It has these long trails following the path and the meaning and symbolism of those things.
Yeah, including the stopper.
Yeah, the tequila stopper.
Okay, so with that, any other thoughts on this episode that we didn't already mention?
I mean, I covered this on the Instant Take, but I think it's really just the right tone for an episode following something as grave as Nacho's death, because it's like there's just kind of some movement of the chess pieces without anything major, which I think is good because, first of all, it sort of lets us have more time to process Nacho's death, and also it's almost respectful.
Yeah.
If too much happens right afterward, it's like, okay, he's just one thing among many other events.
Diluting it, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that was good. It had its lighthearted moments, but like I said, there were a lot of aspects to it that were uncomfortable and unsettling too. So it was both a calm episode, but things moved along, and it gave us a lot to think about when it comes to character development and the relationship between Saul and Kim.
Yeah, 100% agreed with all that. I was even thinking earlier today about how you sometimes need a slower episode. You can't be flooring it all the time. But then I thought about it. It wasn't even really that slow an episode. If you compare it to an average episode of Better Call Saul, it had just as many plot developments. It had a lot of great tension, a lot of great laughs. So if you compare it to last week's, less impactful things happened. But I wouldn't even consider it really a slower than average episode.
Compared to an early episode of this show, this was moving at light speed.
This was the final season of Game of Thrones compared to an early episode of Better Call Saul.
Thank God it isn't really like that, though.
Yeah.
Because the pace at which that started to move was like vomit-inducing.
Yeah, if we were to stick with that pace, next episode, Kim would just she would just slaughter like 50 people, just start killing everyone.
Yeah.
She goes to the nail salon. She's going to kick my husband out of the nail salon and kills her. So I don't think that's going to happen, thankfully.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I do want to say that we got some really nice reviews in the Apple Podcast app, got a couple of nice emails, but we're probably going to reserve those shout outs and everything till next week because we have a very busy day ahead. Got to see Doctor Strange tonight.
That's true.
Multiverse of Madness. Also, because of that busy day, you probably won't see any clips, except for Kim's desk.
Oh, yeah.
But with that, I want to say that if you're listening to this as a podcast and you want to see us, click the link in the show notes. You can go over to our YouTube channel. And if you want to be just an amazing person, you can go into the Apple Podcast app, leave a rating, leave a review. You can also see our email address if you want to write into the show with thoughts, theories, feedback, whatever.
Compliments.
If you want to, if you feel so inclined. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe button, and
Ding!
the bell icon so you are notified the next time we do this. And if you want to listen to us without seeing us, links to the podcast in the description. With that, I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
And this is Saulcast. We see a how do you say this word? Octagonal?
Is it 8-sided?
Yeah.
Octagonal.
Yeah. Octagonal.
It's an octagon.
We see a very peculiarly shaped desk.